Welcome to another Pro Football Doc podcast. And yes, it is Pro Football Doc, but we cover a bunch of different sports. And had to get this special guest on today. We'll cover football, we'll cover some basketball, but what we talk about is injuries. And there have been a lot of injuries in UFC recently. So I had the fortune of running into my friend and superstar UFC fighter. No one knows more about injuries, giving out the injuries, of course, than Chuck Liddell. Welcome to the show, Pro Football Doc Podcast. Chuck, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for having me, man. How you doing?
I'm doing good. So did you end up winning at opening day or no?
Actually, I broke even, which I guess is all right when you're at the track. So it's a win. Having fun out there. Had a good time and didn't lose big, so we're good.
Well, that's good. If you didn't lose big, then that's definitely a win if you didn't lose big there. So one quick question off the bat. How do you get through life? Like everywhere you go, people know who you are, right? And you're a big guy and you're noticeable and everyone knows where you go. And one of the things is I was chatting with you at the track and then I was getting grief from my wife and others because apparently, I don't know if you can see it, but some Instagram model, tweeted a picture of her or put a picture up of her with you in the background saying, "Sup, Chuck?" And meanwhile, I got thrown under the bus because and my wife said, "What are you doing there?" I was like, "I don't know. I don't even know who that girl is." But
no, that stuff happens all the time, but it is what it is. I mean, I think my wife's used to it, so it's not a big deal.
All good. So we were talking a little bit. I wanted to share and chat a little bit about recently. It seems like a lot of significant injuries. I mean, look, it's UFC. There's always injuries, right? A lot of broken legs. We talked from.
Yeah, I was going to ask you that question. Like, I mean, I don't know what, because I've only seen that a couple of times. I've been watching kickboxing and fighting since, the early 90s, and I've been only seeing that kind of a break a couple of times, and it's like like the Anderson Silva break, and then Chris Weidman getting the same break. That to me was crazy. That it's the same break. It happened in the opposite direction, right?
Right. I mean, there's no question. I mean, if you really look at it here, like here's I'm putting it up on the screen here.
Yeah, that's just.
I
watched a couple of you break it down. There was and I've seen it. I went back and watched the fight again. And, it looked like that first leg check when he turned his foot, kind of similar to the Anderson Silva one, like that short check that you do. And it looked like he caught him right on the bone right there. And then I guess later on that front kick, I said, caught the elbow too. And that, I mean, maybe it's just and then his trainer, I think, said he had an injury from prior, a little bit, not a bad one, but he thought it wasn't that bad, but he had one from prior. And I think just the accumulation of impact and, and trauma, was just the accumulation is what causes it to happen.
Well, yeah. And, in medicine, we say weird things happen in threes, So you had Anderson Silva, who a few years back had a Paul George type fib fracture from a kick from Chris Weidman, and he came back to fight. And then years later, Chris Weidman, with his last couple of months, had same thing happen to him and surgery. And this one with Connor, I think, is a little different, especially how the actual moment it broke didn't really have any trauma except the weight of his own body. It wasn't direct trauma. So it does fit for what McGregor has said, that he had a stress fractures, he said, that UFC knew about, Dana White knew about, his doctors knew about. And so that probably causes a little bit of weakness. It's like a piece of wood with a small crack in it, or a piece of concrete with a crack in it, right? That crack can propagate. And then maybe with that check that you said, and maybe again with that front kick, it's broken more. That speaks to Connor's toughness, right? He kept fighting. It had to hurt like crazy, right? But I know you shrug because that's what you guys do, right?
That's what fighters do. To make it to that level, I mean, most guys, making that level are tough guys. I mean, they're gonna, and you're used to, as long as you can push off on it, you can use it, it works. You're not worried about it. Okay, I'd always get, someone gets hurt, I go, okay, is it hurt? Is it injury or is it just hurt? Oh, it just hurts. Okay, keep going.
Yeah, and I think your point is an excellent one that I would love to make. And it's true. Let me correct a little bit what you're saying, if you don't mind. It's not because you're a fighter you're like that. It's because you're at the top levels of UFC you're like that. Because if you're not, you wouldn't be there. Here's what I always say in any sport, right? There's a weed out process. In the game of golf, if you're not mentally tough, you're not going to get to the level of playing at the Masters. In the game of football, like people ask me, is your son going to play football? Are you going to let him? My wife still says no. I probably will. But between you and I mean, he just came off a baseball tournament, whatever. I don't know that he's going to like the contact. Right. So I think it will weed itself out. And same with you in your sport. Like, I think people, I hear all the time in football, like we'll talk about in the second half of the podcast, Saquon Barkley, how's he doing? He's doing great if he were a regular human, but needs to be superhuman to play at that NFL and Saquon Barkley level, which he isn't yet, right? People don't realize that being a really good fighter in UFC and being a great fighter in UFC is a big deal. It's like the difference between a 5 handicap golfer and a scratch golfer. It's huge. The difference between a scratch golfer and a professional golfer is huge. And as you speak to it, you don't just decide I'm a tough guy and fight and you train and you have to do all that. But to get up to that level, all you cats are different. I mean, you're a different breed. I mean, you may be more different than most, but you're all different.
There's levels to anything. I always say, like, you could be the B level fight leagues. You could be a world beater down there and come up to the UFC and get set right back down. I know a bunch of guys are like 20-2. They've had 10 or 12 wins, and then they make it in the UFC. In the first fight in the UFC, they get knocked back down, and they go in, they have 10 or 12 more wins, and then they go back up in the UFC, and then they get knocked back down because they just aren't ready to make that transition into that level of fighting.
Yeah, and in the mental side, like, I'm sure if Conor wants to return to fight, he can physically, just like Chris Weidman will if he wants to, and just like Anderson Silva did, even though it was late in his career. But even then, is it worth it? Are you making the money? And there also has to be a mental side to it too, right? How do you react to that injury? Do you still always worry it?
Well, I was talking to Anderson Silva actually about it after the Weidman one, and he was talking when he came back. It's like that's always in the back of your mind throwing that kick, and you never quite throw that kick the same again because you're still worried about, man, is it going to break this time? It's hard to get. It took a while to get over that.
Yeah, and that's the same. Like I say, from any injury, let's say coming back from ACL, we were talking about Saquon, until he takes a bad hit on that knee, until he really something's to him in that knee, and he has that moment of, oh my gosh, it happened again. And he's able to dust himself off and realize it's okay. That barrier will always be there until Anderson Silva or whoever, Connor McGregor, Chris Weidman, kicked really hard again, or fully lets go on a kick without apprehension and realizes it's okay. Every athlete has that moment in my mind where you go, until you really get it tested, where you know it's okay, you think it's okay, you believe it's okay, but you can't be a UFC fighter or an NFL football player and just believe. You have to know in your heart of hearts that everything is good to really give it your all and to do that. And I think that's right. There's a big side to it mentally.
Yeah. And I really think if Conor decides he wants to come back, I mean, it's hard that he doesn't. I don't think he needs the money after, and he really has to come back because he really just wants to come back and prove it to himself he can. And he's done. He's had been a champion. He's done everything. I mean, I don't know that he wants to come back. That's a long road to come back from something like that. At the end of your career when you've done so much and you've made and you're comfortable.
Well, there's no question he's comfortable and financially and the whole deal, but I don't know. I don't know Conor McGregor, but just seeing him and seeing his persona, I don't see how he goes out this way, right?
Yeah,
I mean,
I mean,
I mean,
I'll be excited to see if he makes that decision, because I know he doesn't have to. So if he makes that decision, I know it's because he wants to and he wants to prove something.
right.
And that's a Conor I want to watch fight.
Yeah, it's not the money. It's he, and I don't think you can get motivated by money. The amounts of money that's going around right now. I mean, you don't. I mean, if you're fighting for money, I don't see that working out very well. I mean, the UFC is a different breed. Is my thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we also chatted a little bit, and I talked about here, and I want to share your reaction to it. I talked about how Conor McGregor's admission could lead to more trouble, and what I mean by that is him saying that right here, him saying that there were stress fractures and everyone knew about it, etc. My whole thing about that is I don't doubt at all that UFC knew about it. I don't doubt, and I'm not disparaging him anyway, that Dana White knows about it. I mean, he knows about everything. I don't doubt that the UFC doctor knew about it. I don't doubt that Conor McGregor knew about it. I sincerely doubt that the Nevada State Athletic Commission doctor knew about it or found out about it, because if he did, he wouldn't have let him fight. And
yeah, so, but that's like, it's like coming to me and asking you, come to me in the corner and asking me, are you all right? Can you see? If I say, oh man, no, I can't see, I want out of the fight. If I want to fight, I'm going to say, I don't care if I'm seeing 5 of you. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm fine. I'm good.
Yeah. No question. And I agree 100%. My point isn't that Conor's stress fractures weren't real. My point is when he signed the form and said he said he was fine, because you have to tell your injuries, tell your things inside the form. The doctor couldn't detect a stress fracture like that, so that's how he passed. But you're right. You're not going to tell them about that. I mean, that's just the way.
I mean, me personally, I wouldn't tell them afterwards. If I decided to fight with something, I'm not going to complain about it after the fight, after the fact. So I can't keep my story consistent, but I'm just saying, as a fighter, I'm trained ready to fight. If I feel I'm okay to fight with it, I'm going to fight. I fought with a torn MCL. I tore it 2 weeks before a fight. I mean, if I got kicked in that leg, I mean, it just froze.
So speaking back to that point, you're right. I mean, a lot of times, whether it's a high school kid or an NFL guy, high school kid, when I say to them, you think you can play on this? They go, I think so. That means they're not good to go, and that mom and dad in the room are the ones pushing them to play on it. The ones that want to play on it are like, oh yeah, I'm good to go. And they're limping. Oh yeah, I'm good to go. And they're the ones talking mom and dad and me into it. And the ones that are, as you say, looking for a way out, say, I can give it a try. I think so. And that's really saying.
The funny thing is I wouldn't tell Dana either, because I didn't want him to worry about it. So Dana never knew. I told him after, hey, I tore my MCL a week before this. It's like, what? It's crazy. But yeah, it is what it is.
Well, I think that's why I said everyone knows you're a little bit different, in that, as you say, if you decided to fight with it, you're living with it, and so to bring it up later doesn't change anything. And right. You are who you are, genuine. I think that's why people love you for who you are. So how is the UFC world different now than when you were in your prime?
Well, there's a lot of differences. I mean, everything's different. I mean, guys now are, starting from when I came into the sport, geez, we were just trying to learn how to train it. How can we train it? How can we do this? How can we do that? Now it's guys coming starting from kids doing mixed martial arts, starting in gyms that are ready to go. They got strength coaches, nutritionists, everything. So it's come a long way, and it's and been blew up. I remember trying to fight to get on the leisure section of a paper. Now we're on, we're fighting on ESPN or on Fox, and we're all over.
I mean, you're right. Nowadays, people train and aspire to this. I mean, you just grew up and did it, and like, you didn't have nutritionists and all this other stuff and plyometrics guys and all those. You just did it. You loved it. Yeah. Different world. You were not to be negative, but you're not of the Jake Paul, whatever.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it was a good time. It was fun growing up through that time. So.
Gotcha. Well, what do you got going on in your life now? What's coming up for you?
I just doing my own thing. I still do a lot of appearances. I go around and do some movies. I'm really liking acting, getting into that. I got my YouTube show, No Checks Given. I'm working on. That's a lot of fun because it's basically me going and doing stuff I like to do, and then just videoing me doing stuff I like doing. So that's a lot of fun. You can go out, blow things up, and fishing and
no more fights.
I'm retired. I'm 51 now. Still staying in shape, but I'm retired.
I gotcha. And I think the acting thing would be perfect for you, because I would imagine there's a lot of roles out there that you wouldn't have to do that much acting. You could just be yourself. And
yeah, there are quite a bit of those. When I get, it's like, you gotta go out there, you gotta go punk this guy. Okay, well, no problem. Here we go.
You don't have to get into character for that. You could just be yourself.
Yeah, well, yeah, I'm actually pretty laid back. So, but I always get people asking me to scare their friends. So, I've got a lot of practice going up and playing that part.
Well, next time I run into you, I'll find a friend and punk the friend for some reason. I like that one. And film it. That'll be a good one. All right, thank you for the time. I appreciate making the time, and good to see you, my friend. And
my pleasure, man.